Thanks. Good to see you all this morning. And thanks for the introduction, Stefan. I can confirm my love for chess, lifelong. I've also been a tutor for chess in schools for about 8 years. I'm not tutoring now, but I have been doing that. But in my other life, I do work on gender, and in particular, masculinity within that. And so I am freelance, but I also have an honorary fellowship at Durham University in the sociology department. And we've been doing some work with the UK Government Equalities Office on gender norms and masculinity. So how they're formed, how they affect the attitudes of men and boys, how they change, etc., etc. And that work will actually be published next year. And I'm thinking, in a way, that's very relevant to this, of course. I think Jonathan Ruxton was saying that yesterday that our work here is about chess and gender, but it's also about chess, gender and society as well. And so we need to bear those issues in mind. But what I was just going to talk about was some evidence from some of the survey work that I've done for CSC in 2014 and 2016. I'll concentrate on the 2016 material. There were actually 4 surveys in each of those years, but the one with tutors I think has the most interesting material, so I'll concentrate on that, but I'll bring in little bits of other things as well, if I can. One thing to say, and I think this actually is relevant to other aspects of the conference as well, is the surveys just provide bald figures about girls and boys. And in fact, you know, I hope in maybe 5 years' time, we'll be talking about differences between girls and differences between boys, as well as between boys and girls, if you see what I mean. So, you know, in my work, what we call an intersectional perspective is increasingly important. So issues around identity, race, faith, class, location, even the kind of institution that children are learning in, all of these things make a mix which confuse or nuance the picture of girls v boys. But having said that, I'll just concentrate on that in the work that I'll present now, hopefully. It's coming. Okay. I don't have a stick to change. Oh, could you take the notes out? Sorry. This one? Yeah, okay. And if I want to change slide? No?
Like this.
Okay.
Yes.
Ah, yeah, okay. Okay, let's move on. Just to say a little bit about the tutors and the schools. I mean, this is a sort of self-response questionnaire through SurveyMonkey. I won't go through all these stats, but important to note, 91% of the respondents were male, and also, you know, vast proportion were white British as well. So the majority of the respondents in this particular survey were white British men aged between 45 and 64, and, you know, that's probably unsurprising given the tutor pool that CSC has. And also, I think this was mentioned yesterday, really, the role of the chess tutor quite often being part-time, regularly undertaken by those who have more flexibility in their work, perhaps because they're at a later point in their careers and they've got fewer direct caring responsibilities. It also obviously reflects the wider domination of the chess world by men, both in the UK and internationally. And I guess you can say that you know, they are representatives of a predominantly white male norm within chess. And it may be that as part of the norm, other issues are less visible to them around perhaps gender or race and so on and so forth. Having said that, the strength of the support that they provided for developing chess amongst women and girls in the survey was, very encouraging. None suggested that girls were incapable of playing chess to the same standard as boys, and they also overall endorsed the view that there are significant cultural and social barriers that prevent girls' advancement in chess. So, I won't go through this slide either in any detail, but suffice it to say that, as you probably heard yesterday, chess in schools emphasises the importance of classes taking place as much as possible within curriculum time. And that's hugely beneficial in terms of getting girls involved. Obviously, that leads to higher participation rates. Yeah, as one of the tutors actually said, and this is a quote, "The percentage of female students is certainly higher when classes are compulsory compared to chess clubs." And another one said, "The small proportion of girls in voluntary chess clubs means that they can feel outnumbered, and if this occurs in the early stages, they may be less likely to stick with the activity." So there are all issues about what's voluntary and what's compulsory in terms of participation. Oh, cool, wrong one. Okay. We asked them to what extent they think children enjoy going to chess lessons. This is the views of tutors. You can see here that tutors, and this is a predominantly male group, felt 62% of boys enjoyed chess lessons a tremendous amount, compared to 35% of girls. Having said that, 56% of girls were felt to enjoy them quite a bit, and 8% a little bit, compared to 36% and 2% of boys, respectively. So, as I said before, no responses stated that girls and boys didn't enjoy chess lessons at all, and these percentages were very similar to those we found in the survey in 2014. And just to say, interestingly, that from the survey of school staff, and that was mostly classroom teachers, so about 68% were classroom teachers, and heads or deputy heads, about 26%, they felt that 66% of boys enjoyed chess lessons a tremendous amount, compared to 51% of girls. So what that essentially shows is those working in schools were considerably more positive about girls' enjoyment of chess than the tutors were, and there are issues that one could discuss about that. I mean, it might reflect the strong level of commitment amongst school staff to girls' advancement in education, and keep pushing that. Yeah, it might reflect the strong level of commitment amongst school staff to girls' advancement and the impact of measures to strengthen their involvement. It could also reflect the fact that within UK primary schools, the majority of staff are female, so it's quite a different group replying to that question from the school staff than from the tutors group. Talking about the attitudes of girls to chess, I mean, there wasn't really very much difference according to most tutors. Most felt there was no obvious gender difference, that boys and girls loved chess equally. Some thought that boys liked chess more than girls, and also that being interested in chess can be seen by girls as being somehow at odds with being feminine. But many of the tutors also noted wide variations within each of these categories, as I referred to at the start. And also, as the last comment here suggests, wide differences between schools as well, which suggests that the culture of an individual school can make a difference and be important in terms of girls' participation. They also talked about barriers to girls' participation. I'll just run through these briefly. Lack of confidence amongst girls, lack of parental support. I guess what's meant there, I think, is connected to the last point about perceptions of chess as a boys' activity. I think there are some parents who effectively transmitted the message to their children, to their girls in particular, that actually chess wasn't for them. Maybe they'd be better off doing music or ballet or whatever. So the role of parents is actually important in this. Lack of female role models. Well, I said something about the proportion of tutors for CSC who are male, at least in this survey, and that's been talked about quite a lot in the conference so far. Being put off or put down by boys or possibly other girls. Again, I mean, I think that has been talked about within the conference. I don't have much more to say about it here, but it's important to recognise it as an issue. Lack of encouragement and support for girls also. One of the tutors said that actually the biggest problem is the virtual 100% dropout of chess activity that occurs to females aged 11 plus. And I think, you know, that's an interesting area to discuss. So certainly the transition to secondary school, the lack of chess tuition or opportunities in secondary. I mean, for me, as someone who grew up here, that's very different now. I mean, in my secondary school, we played chess. We didn't play in primary, so it feels like there's a bit of a reversal going on. But the secondary schools really are not taking up chess so much, and those who are playing chess are quite often then moving on to chess clubs rather than playing within the school. So moving on to issues that tutors talked about in terms of ways to raise and sustain girls' participation. I mean, some of these points are rather obvious and you'll have heard them before, but a common view amongst the tutors was that a key factor in encouraging female participation is, of course, the attitude of the tutor. Some said, well, this just means treating boys and girls equally. Others, and perhaps it's hinted at in the last of these comments, suggested perhaps a more proactive approach, given the male domination of chess at all levels. Sorry, I had time to read these. Oh God. Female role models, again, has been covered. But there was a widespread, perception, that encouraging female class teachers, other female school staff, older girls to get involved, that would bolster support for younger girls. Occasional visits, simultaneous displays by strong female players also would be helpful. And this slide, as some of you I'm sure will recognise, shows Rachel Reeves, who is, well, actually we're in an election period, so perhaps she's not an MP at the moment, but she is usually, the MP for Leeds West and former under-14 British girls champion. And this is a picture of her at the London Chess Classic a few years ago. So I think, I also had a quote in here which I didn't have room for, but she was saying that basically, she was told by a boy at an early stage, well, you play like a girl, so she then said, right, I'm going to beat him, and she did. And she was very clear about the things that she'd gained in her political life also from chess. De-emphasising competition and winning, I think this is an interesting area as well. Of course, the image of chess, that it's competitive, that it's aggressive, that it may be unfeminine in some way, is this off-putting for girls? And you can see some of the same factors actually operating in sport more generally as well. Of course, chess has often been described as a battle or a war game. I'm not sure whether this analogy really holds true. I mean, it's been argued too that chess is actually antithetical to war. And I got a comment from Jen Shahada there. She says, both players begin with armies of precisely the same strength and use only their intellects to express their aggression, which I think is a different perspective on chess as a war game. And I mean, there may be something for girls about classroom activities focusing on cooperation, playing in teams, and so on, but I think one has to be careful about exaggerating the benefits of de-emphasising competition. Competition is at the heart of the game. And also, there's evidence that women and girls do compete at equal rates when the nature of the task seems to authorise it. And there's an interesting book by someone called Claudia Fine, I think her name is, called Testosterone Rex, Unmaking the Myth of Our Gendered Minds. She's written a number of books, actually. And, her point is really that there isn't so much difference in terms of the brain capacities for girls and boys, and also that the brain is very plastic and is very influenced by the training that's available, and it can change depending on the situations and environments that you're faced with. Avoiding gender stereotypical materials. Again, this is a fairly obvious point. Several tutors argued that care must be taken to avoid gender stereotypes in all materials, and that these should promote the participation of girls in chess. So posters of female players to display in the classroom were felt to be important. highlighting the significance of women's achievements in chess and famous female role models within that. I think yesterday too it was mentioned that one could play with the notion of the queen. You can foreground this rather unusual aspect of chess, the overriding power of the only clearly female piece in the game. And if you want to know more about that, there's quite an interesting book by Marilyn Yalom, The Birth of the Chess Queen, which talks about the historical position of the queen and the place of the queen in courtly love, if you like, many years ago. Special provision for girls. A number of measures were proposed that would target women and girls in order to boost their participation. So separate teaching, school teams with a rule stating at least one member must be female, free tournament entry fees for girls, some of the things that are mentioned in these quotes as well. And obviously there's a lot of discussion in the chess community as to the wisdom of this approach. I think a common view amongst the tutors was that measures such as this could be useful in the short term, but could in the long term hold girls back. And I think perhaps the last comment, the longer one there, does refer to that. Once the number of girls increased in our events, then we dropped the girls-only events. And since then, we've enjoyed a very healthy balance of girls and boys at our events. Challenging the male-dominated culture in chess. It's clearly a very male-dominated environment. It is often said that resulting culture can be sexist, it can be misogynistic, and I've heard examples mentioned during this conference. Cases of harassment, cases of abuse of women and girls have occurred. And of course, such a culture can drive girls and women away from participating. Interestingly, perhaps tutors didn't mention harassment and abuse directly in their answers to the question on gender. But they did comment on the importance of addressing the male-dominated culture too. So it was felt particularly to be important to challenge the language and attitudes of children where this involved putting down girls. So a few quick conclusions. I have to say these are more things that I thought of rather than things that come from the tutors. So, this is me really. Taking advantage of girls' own networks, word of mouth is the most effective form of recruitment. And I think buddy systems could be quite important here. And in a way, from my classes, if you can get, I hesitate to use sort of military metaphor, but a bridgehead of girls established within your class, then they can support each other. And actually that can be really important in sustaining their involvement. The involvement of the female teacher, tutor, we've said a lot about that in the last day. Engaging with parents. Going back to the slide that I said before, sometimes it's the lack of parents' engagement or positivity about girls and chess, which can be significant. Family chess sessions could be a way of tackling that, trying to engage with parents more actively. Reducing girls' fears of being judged, being exposed as lacking ability, not fitting in. Again, these are the kinds of things which they found in areas of women in sport as well, girls in sport. Judgment can come from all angles, from immediate friends and family, so, being afraid of not living up to their expectations, from other girls sometimes, not matching up to their standards, and from boys who might be dismissive of their abilities. And in terms of tackling that, obviously some of the things you can do, the importance of a positive welcome, consistent reassurance, highlighting the positives, that chess can be fun, gives a sense of achievement, and also it can be a sociable game as well. I think that might be important in reaching girls. I won't say anything on the last point there, although I did mention it at the start of my presentation. I think that could be significant. When we think about the experience of, girls from refugee communities and boys from refugee communities as well. Girls from different groups will have different needs. Girl-only sessions, I just covered that, but the point about giving confidence I think is significant. Whether you need to continue with those in the longer term is uncertain. Promoting girls' representation and achievements in the media. Perhaps we haven't done enough of that and we could do more. I've seen a bit more recently, but I think there's still more to come on that. Challenging sexist assumptions and behaviour. That's a fairly obvious point, addressing harassment and abuse and thinking about, moving to questions of what federations are doing, safeguarding procedures, information and training, perhaps a climate of open discussion as well amongst teachers, amongst parents about some of these issues. And finally, I think, as I've mentioned in my presentation, there's quite a lot we can learn from the research and the organisations that promote women in sport. A lot of the issues, I think, are actually quite similar. If you look at Sport England's This Girl Can campaign, there's quite a lot of material which actually relates to what we're doing in the chess world, although it feels like we're quite a lot behind what they're doing there. So I'll stop there, and if you want to ask me questions, I don't know whether we do that now or later.
Yeah, questions directly to the presentation are now. Of course, go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, what were the reasons given as to why girls don't enjoy going to chess clubs?
Well, I think we didn't actually ask that. I mean, I think some of the barriers that I mentioned were significant, but I don't think we specifically asked that. There was a general question about, attitudes. I mean, I think maybe we need to do some further follow-up work, really. I mean, there's also an issue here about how much can you get out of surveys and how much do you need to do by actually detailed qualitative work. And some of the questions that I was addressing, I have done some work in Newham in East London, and it was possible to flesh that out further, really. But I haven't got an easy answer to, your question, I'm afraid.
This is the opinion of the tutor, not necessarily having asked the girls.
No. There was a survey of girls, but to be honest, there wasn't sufficient material in that for me to really present it.
So it could be just a situation that the tutor thought they didn't like it.
Tutor thought that, yes, or also that the teachers thought that girls, enjoyed it more. So yeah, I mean, it begs rather a lot of questions. I think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question. I mean,
Yeah.
if at the time when you did the
Yeah.
survey, most of the tutors were really like white British, rather. But this has maybe changed over time. But anyway, is there a chance that they answered like they answered because this is what you should answer rather than what they really thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, it's answers to the employer.
Yeah.
Survey. So.
Yeah.
Was there
I mean, it was anonymous. They weren't named, so I think we didn't. We wanted to try and encourage them to speak openly. But I take your point. There's what you say, and when I was talking about what the teachers said about girls' participation, I mean, you could say that was loaded because they wanted to boost perceptions of girls' equality, if you like. So yeah, I think that's significant. But again, the point that I was mentioning earlier about what kind of research are we doing is significant too. I think you really need to sit down, do longer interviews, tease out some of this nuance, really. Surveys are very useful, but they only take you so far.
I think
Yeah.
thanks to Sunny for the moment.
Thanks.